saved up about a month's worth of different solutions and chemicals from different experiments because I figured this would be the best way to walk through how the 4 horseman metal refining system works. The first part you'll want to set up if you do this system is storage. You're going to need 8 banks. That's right, I call them banks because they end up full of money. But we'll get to those in a little while. First, let's start going through these beakers so I can talk about what goes where so we can get our money in the bank. So the first thing I'm going to do is go after the gold foils and the copper chloride. So the first thing I'm going to put through is this gold-plated rinse. So this will have some copper chloride, but this will just be a lot of water. Gold. This was the last little bit of rinse gold from a different experiment, kind of a precursor to this larger experiment where I just did a little test. So we'll just go ahead and pour that in as well. We'll just wash the gold foils right down into the filter. We'll leave these 2 clasped. And next we're going to filter out the main beaker of gold foils and just get those down into the filter too. Alright, so while we have our copper chloride filtering over there, getting our gold foils back, I'm going to empty this out. We want to get this, the contents of what's in here, poured out, rinsed off, collect any more foils that might be in here, and then we're going to go ahead and melt this up in the furnace and make the rest of this into an anode bar for the copper salt. I'm going to go and set this aside and get this rinsed off. So here we're going to go back to the hematite experiment. This is where we're extracting the nickel from some hematite ore. And this will be sulfuric acid solution on top, so that'll go in the sulfuric bucket. These are the middles, so I'm going to get these poured out and dried out so I can get a weight. It's about when I ran out of beakers. Went to the old mason jar. So I'll go ahead and rinse this a little bit more, and then we'll get this dried out. This will just mark sulfuric for the sulfuric waste bucket. Now I'm not quite sure what I want to do yet with this nickel sulfate. So I'm going to go ahead and work on the sodium hydroxide that we got from yesterday's video, where we used a sodium hydroxide generator to deplete some gold with the chlorine that it exhausted. So I'm going to filter, I'm going to get set up to filter this here in just a minute once that should be just about done. And we'll get our sodium hydroxide out of here. I've been boiling this down. And the majority of this water is, I'll usually just boil it down about halfway because there will be some salt in there. So we'll get rid of the salt water solution on top and take our sodium hydroxide out. And then the salt water solution that's on top will just go right back into the generator for a second run. So I've decided I want to go ahead and concentrate down this nickel sulfate from the hematite experiment, so we'll get that up stirring on some heat. Here on this. When I walk away, I will turn it up a little higher. So all of the beakers in this row all have some different form of silver in them. This is some contaminated silver that has a little bit of lead that came out of the copper cell. This was an experiment that I ran for the lye and sugar, and I ran incomplete. I didn't put enough lye and sugar in, and to see what would happen if you underdid it. This is just some cement silver that's precipitated out, but it might have a little bit of gold in it. This is silver nitrate that has silver precipitating out on copper. And the beaker back here is a bunch of filter papers that I have left over from filtering some cement silver. So the first thing I can do is set this aside because I'll have to do something separate here. But all of these incomplete, this is an incomplete reaction and a contaminated reaction. We're going to go ahead and pour it all into this beaker here. We'll hit it one more time with nitric acid to get everything that can go into solution and filter out all of the paper and get all of these incomplete reactions complete. Now always pour in just a splash first and see what kind of reaction. So I'm getting a silver chloride reaction. So here's no reaction, so I'll go ahead and just pour that in. It's been dried out at the bottom of that beaker for a while. Maybe let that soak just a minute or set this by the heat. Then we kind of have this unknown, what I believe though is gold and, or sorry, silver with maybe a little bit of gold. But again, just splash a little bit in, see if you get a reaction. There's no reaction, so we're going to go ahead and pour this in. So now what was just filter paper, we know now is silver, gold, and lead. So these two experiments I know are going to need a further reaction, so I'm going to put those up on the shelf for now. Experiment that I ran with some PGMs and some silver in it, and this is basically copper nitrate, but it has some sulfuric acid in it. So I'll get this filtered off, and now this will go into the fourth bucket, the pre-distillation. Go ahead and move my filtering inside the hood. And next we'll take these two bottles. I use this a lot. I love this little device. It's a way to take your filter off and have a place to put it that doesn't take up a lot of space on the bench. So you'll see me use this a lot. Well, occasionally I lose track of what's in here, and that's what I poured into these two beakers. So what I have here is an unknown solid, and here we just have an unknown liquid. The unknown solid I'll just set back here for a minute. And what I'll do with this is I'm just going to drip in a little bit of it into another one of my known substances and look for a reaction that I think I might get. So here's some aqua regia that needs sodium metabisulfite, maybe has a little bit of gold left in it. So I'm going to go ahead and pour this solution in just a drop. There was no reaction at all, so that tells me that this is chloride. Now I can pour this in with the hydrochloric and I won't get any reaction. And to do is here's the beaker from the copper chloride that we're filtering from the gold foil. We'll label this HCl. And this will go in the hydrochloric waste. So anything that has hydrochloric in it, we want to go in the hydrochloric waste. So we'll also test this by just splashing in a little here first, making sure we don't get any reaction. So now we can go ahead and just pour that in. Now if you make a mistake and you get any sulfates or nitrates in your HCl, it's not a problem. We're just doing our best to really isolate the 3 acids best we can. Now with the filter bottle solids, I'm going to take this same beaker of aqua regia from gold plated, and the thing to consider here is this can be dissolved with nitric acid, sulfuric acid, or hydrochloric acid. Hydrochloric and nitric aqua regia is the strongest acid that we'll have in the system. If you use that acid, it goes in the hydrochloric bucket, the hydrochloric waste bucket, and whatever metal is in here will work its way out of that bucket. But I'll test it once or twice before it goes in the big beaker in the back, before it goes in the main bucket to be distilled and get our acid back. So here we'll just want to splash in a little bit of this. Yeah, it looks like what it'll do is just dissolve the metal that's in there. It'll go in the hydrochloric bucket. Now I'm going to put a dash of our SMB into this beaker, and let's see if there was any gold in this solution. Oh yeah, we still have gold in there for sure. At this point, we're going to go ahead and mix these all together. We'll give this a while to settle, make sure there's enough SMB in there, go ahead and filter out our gold, and the waste material from this just goes in the hydrochloric bucket. And the way I look at this is just another place that we found a precious metal. Whatever we don't catch here still will come out in the end. And our copper chloride goes in the HCl. Next, these 2 beakers were just some spent aqua regia that had sodium metabisulfite. These will just go in the hydrochloric. Here we'll hold back our little bit of gold. this will just take over and filter our little bit of gold that we have left in here out first, and then add that to the hydrochloric. Now with the salty experiment, I could probably just pour that in the hydrochloric waste, but I want to run a few more tests with it, so that'll go up on the shelf. But one of the tests I am going to run is just pouring a splash of it into the hydrochloric waste and seeing if there's any reaction. I do believe all that's in there is salt and hypochlorous acid and distilled water, so we'll just use this as a bit of an experiment. Did produce a little bit of gas, so we'll just note that down, and we'll have to continue to finish this experiment. And I do think that there's probably some platinum in here because my anode was disintegrated. So I'll set this up on the shelf and we'll continue to test this. Still an experiment. Here in these two beakers, we just have some dirty silver oxide. So this was an experiment that I ran, and I believe that there's some other base metals in here. I'm not exactly sure what all is in there. In this experiment, I do know that there's copper hydroxide that got mixed in with this silver chloride, and there's also possibly a little bit of lead mixed in because this came out of the copper cell. So I'm going to combine these two, and then we'll filter off the solution, which is copper chloride, so that can go in the hydrochloric waste bin. We'll take our solids and set those aside in just a little bit of distilled water because I'm going to continue to rinse these for maybe another day or so. Now this I'll just set back behind me on top of the buckets, and we'll let this settle overnight, and then I can filter this off in the morning. Oh, I almost forgot. Now I can take the hematite. This is from the hematite experiment, and this is the iron sulfate that we've precipitated out and filtered and separated. I'll get this poured over, and I'm going to dry out this iron sulfate, and we'll just collect it and save it. Now we'll have to filter all of our copper nitrate. So this was an experiment that involved aqua regia and copper, and there's also a little bit of silver in here. So this will just need to be filtered, and this will go in with hydrochloric acid. So here we have our copper cell slimes. This was from a refining, or just a clean out of one of the copper cells. So I'm going to go ahead and filter this, and we'll get it poured into, this is my copper cell collection. You'll see this kind of sitting up on the right hand side next to the copper cells on top of the DC power supplies. So we'll take this over to be filtered and just add these into our storage beaker.
Remember that every metal that goes into solution will come out of solution. So every metal that goes into these banks will get back out. One thing that's different about the hydrochloric bank is that instead of putting iron in this bucket to precipitate out all of the other metals above iron, I put silver-plated items in there. Two of the metals that I try and keep out of the system are aluminum and iron. And then in the sulfuric bank, I depopulate some circuit boards, and we'll just put those in there and let it eat away all the metal that's on these boards. And then in the nitric bucket, we'll just put copper down in the bottom to cement out any silver that might be left in the nitric solution. And that's how we deposit all the money in the bank. To make a withdrawal, we have to set up our distillation equipment, and I'm going to save that for another video. So thank you very much for watching, and may all your days be blessed.